The skies of Travail had once been calm, painted in shades of blue and gold. Their twin moons drifted across the horizon like guardians watching over the gentle people below. Life on the planet had always been slow and peaceful. The Travailians were not a race of warriors. They had never learned the ways of blood or fire. Instead, they built gardens that stretched for miles, carved music into the air with their voices, and filled their days with trade, art, and teaching. But peace is fragile in a galaxy ruled by empires. The first shadow fell without warning. Vast ships of the Zirathi Dominion appeared above the planet, their black hulls blotting out the stars. To the Travailians, the sight was like the end of the world. The ground shook as energy weapons rained down. Towers crumbled into ash. Cities turned to rubble, and the skies, once golden, burned red with fire. The Travailians had no fleet, no soldiers, no defenses strong enough to resist. They were healers, singers, builders of gentle lives, not warriors. They tried to talk, to reason, to beg the invaders for mercy, but the Dominion did not listen. To them, Travail was only another jewel for their empire. Its resources were ripe, its people weak, and its position in the stars perfect for conquest. So the Dominion took everything. Families fled to caves and underground tunnels, clutching children close as explosions shook the soil above. The elders prayed to whatever god still listened. The young wept in silence. Some whispered that perhaps it would be kinder to surrender fully, to stop resisting and accept their fate. Yet even surrender brought no safety. The Dominion was cruel. They burned villages as warnings. They took prisoners for labor and worse. And they left the survivors to starve, cutting off food and water until the will of Travail broke. Still, the Travailians tried. They sent out signal after signal, messages of distress that echoed through the void. They begged their neighbors. They pleaded with the Council of Worlds. They offered trade, loyalty, anything if only someone would come. But the galaxy was silent. The Council turned away, unwilling to provoke the Dominion. The traders who had once shared laughter with the Travailians fled without looking back. Nearby planets closed their borders, fearful of sharing the same fate. The Travailians waited for an answer that never came. Days turned into weeks. Each sunrise brought more loss. Each night was filled with the glow of burning cities. Hope was dying. On the 35th day of occupation, Elder Serene, one of the oldest voices of Travail, stood among the survivors in a cavern lit by flickering lamps. His body was thin, his voice shaking, but his eyes carried a spark of desperate determination. "We cannot stop the Dominion," he said softly, his voice trembling but strong enough to carry through the chamber. "But perhaps someone else can." The crowd stirred, their eyes wide and filled with fear. "Who?" someone whispered. "Who would stand against them?" The elder took a breath, and the word he spoke made the cavern fall silent. Earth. The name drifted like smoke, heavy and uncertain. Some shivered at the sound. Others frowned as if remembering stories half forgotten. Earth. The death world. Legends said it was a planet of storms and monsters, a world where nature itself fought against life. The creatures who lived there were said to be fierce beyond measure, hardened by endless struggle. They called themselves humans, beings who had risen from a world of violence and carried that fire into the stars. Most of the galaxy feared them. Some avoided them. Others mocked them as primitive. But one truth was whispered in every corner. Humans endured what no one else could. "They are killers," someone murmured in the cavern. "They fight like beasts. They will bring more destruction." But another voice answered, weak but certain. "And yet, perhaps destruction is what we need. Better their fire than the Dominion's chains." The Travailians had no other choices. With shaking hands, they crafted a final signal, one unlike any before. It was not a plea of trade nor of alliance. It was a cry of desperation, a cry for survival. They sent it out into the black void, their voices trembling through the stars. To Earth. To the children of the death world. "We are broken. We are dying. We beg you, if your hearts still carry mercy, save us." When the message was gone, the cavern was quiet. Mothers held their children close. Elders bowed their heads. Warriors who had never held a weapon stared at the dirt floor and wondered if death would be kinder than waiting. And so they waited. For days, nothing came. The Dominion's ships still circled above. The skies still burned. The galaxy still ignored them. But far beyond the edge of known space, in the silence of the void, the signal reached ears that had not forgotten what it meant to suffer. The name Earth would soon mean something new. The Terravalians waited, helplessly, and the stars began to whisper. The message to Earth had been sent into the blackness of space, but silence was all that returned. The people of Terrevel tried not to speak of it, yet the thought was always in their hearts. Was Earth even listening? Did the Deathworlders even care? The elders gathered each night in the cavern halls, their voices low, their faces lined with grief. Some of them still doubted the choice. We called for monsters, one whispered. What if they come and they bring more ruin than the Dominion? Another elder shook his head. We are already ruined. If the Deathworlders destroy us, at least it will be quick. The Dominion makes us die slowly. The word Deathworlders rolled through the caves, soft and fearful. To most of the galaxy, it was not just a description, it was a curse. The stories about Earth had been carried by traders long ago, whispered in the corners of markets, spoken around fires when the night was long. The stories always began the same. Earth was not like other worlds. It was wild. It was violent. It was alive in ways other planets feared to be. There were storms that could tear down forests in hours, oceans that rose in fury and swallowed entire coasts, mountains that spit fire from their hearts, creatures with teeth sharper than blades and venom that killed in moments. Even the air carried sicknesses, invisible hunters that stalked flesh and bone. On such a world, most believed no species could survive. And yet somehow one did. Humans. The Terravalians had never seen a human with their own eyes, but the rumors painted them as both terrifying and strange. They were said to be small compared to giants like the Kaval warriors, fragile compared to armored races like the Vur, but they had something none could match: stubbornness. It was said that humans did not know how to stop, that they could live in fire, in ice, in poison, in deserts of sand and skies of stone. They adapted, changed, and thrived in places where others would perish. Deathworlders, one elder said softly, because their world tried to kill them every day, and yet they lived. They fought. They grew stronger. To the Terravalians, who had always lived in peace, the thought was almost unbearable. How could such creatures understand mercy? How could such a race bring hope when all they knew was war? Still, the people whispered in the dark. They whispered because whispers were all they had left. In the small shelters hidden deep in the rocks, children asked questions. What are humans like? They would say with wide eyes. Their parents would shake their heads, unsure how to answer. Some would tell gentle lies. They are tall, strong, with wings of light. Others would repeat the harsher truths. They are beasts. But sometimes beasts can protect the weak. The children clung to those words, because even beasts were better than the Dominion. On the 40th day of occupation, the Dominion increased their cruelty. Entire villages were dragged from hiding and forced to watch as their homes burned. The air smelled of ash and the skies were dark with smoke. That night, in the deepest cavern, Elder Serene spoke again. His voice was faint, his body weak, but his words carried weight. I have lived many seasons, he said, and I have seen many races. None are perfect. None are kind without limits. But there is one truth I have learned. Those who suffer understand suffering in others. And if the stories of Earth are true, then no race has suffered more than humans. His words struck the people like a spark in the dark. Could it be true? Could the very thing that made humans feared, their endless struggle, be the reason they might come to save Terrevel? But doubt still lived in many hearts. What if they ignore us like the Council? Someone asked. What if they come only to conquer? Another voice whispered. What if they are worse than the Dominion? Elder Serene closed his eyes. His answer was simple. Then we will die as we were meant to, fighting, not begging. The cavern fell silent after that. Even the children did not speak, because deep down they all knew it was true, and then, one night, the silence of the stars broke. At first it was faint, a signal like a heartbeat, unfamiliar, sharp, and strong. It was not the Dominion's language. It was not the Council's tongue. It was something different, something rough and heavy but filled with purpose. The Terravalian engineers listened closely, their hands shaking. They translated the words piece by piece until finally a message came through. We hear you. The room went still. Some gasped, some wept. Others simply fell to their knees in disbelief. The humans had answered. It was not yet salvation, not yet a promise of survival. But it was more than the galaxy had given them in weeks. It was hope. That night, for the first time since the invasion began, the people of Tereval dreamed. They dreamed of ships breaking through the skies, of warriors rising from the stars, of voices shouting in defense of the weak. They dreamed of Deathworlders. And though fear still lingered, something stronger now stirred in their hearts. Because somewhere far beyond the Dominion's reach, Earth was listening, and the Deathworlders were coming. The days that followed the human signal were heavy with waiting. The Trevalians clung to the words, "We hear you," as if they were a lifeline thrown into a storm. But even as hope flickered, doubt whispered in the silence. What if the humans were too far away? What if the Dominion crushed them before they arrived? What if it had only been an empty promise? Above, the Dominion still ruled the skies. Their fleet circled the planet like dark predators, their engines glowing red as they patrolled. On the ground, the people of Tereval hid in their caves and ruins, hearts pounding each time the enemy's ships passed overhead. The cruelty did not slow. Entire families were dragged from hiding, food was stolen, and the Dominion soldiers carved their mark into every stone. The Trevalians prayed. They waited. They endured. And then, on the 50th day of occupation, the sky changed. It began with a ripple, faint at first, like a tremor in the stars. The Dominion commanders noticed it quickly, their scanners lighting up with alarms. Something was coming. Something large. The first ship appeared in silence, sliding out of the darkness like a blade from a sheath. Its shape was strange, angular, sharp, and scarred with old battles. Then another followed. And another. Soon the black void above Tereval filled with ships that bore no banners of the Council, no marks of any known empire. They bore only one symbol, a circle, half blue, half green, a world on Earth. The Trevalians, hiding below, saw the strange crafts through cracks in the smoke-filled sky. Gasps filled the caverns. Children clung to their mothers. The elders whispered in awe. They came, someone breathed. The Deathworlders came. But the Dominion did not tremble. Laughter echoed across their command ships. So these are the monsters of rumor? These little ships? Their fleets were larger, sleeker, armed with weapons built to crush civilizations. They had fought countless battles across the stars, and to them Earth's fleet looked small, old, weak. This is the help Tereval prayed for? A Dominion commander sneered. Let the savages burn. The order was given. Cannons roared, filling the sky with rivers of plasma. Blazing light tore across the void, slamming into the first human vessels. Fire bloomed. The planet shook from the sound of war above. The Terevalians cried out in despair. Their fragile hope cracked like glass. No, some wept. They are too few. They will fall. But the humans did not fall. The human ships advanced through the fire. They moved not like prey, but like predators. Their hulls took the blows, shields straining, metal tearing, but still they pressed forward. And then, they fired back. The Terevalians had never heard such thunder. The sky split open with sound as human weapons answered the Dominion's cannons. Their blasts were not elegant, not clean. They were brutal, heavy, filled with raw power. Where they struck, Dominion ships tore apart in storms of flame, 1, then 2, then 5. In moments, the battle above Tereval was no longer laughter. It was screams. The Trevalians stared at the glowing sky, unable to believe their eyes. Fragile, desperate beings that they were. They had expected the humans to fail. Yet what they saw now was something else entirely. The humans did not fight like soldiers of the Council, who moved with caution and calculation. They fought like creatures born for struggle. They charged through fire. They endured every wound. And with every strike, they tore the Dominion apart. A message cut through the chaos, echoing across every channel, translated into every tongue. The voice was rough, human, but calm. This world is under Earth's protection now. In the Dominion's command chamber, silence fell for the first time since the invasion began. The commanders stared at the battlefield, disbelief twisting into rage. How could such a small fleet stand against them? How could Deathworld savages dare defy the Dominion? Fury replaced arrogance. They ordered every ship into the fight. The sky above Tereval turned into a storm of fire and steel. But below, in the caverns, Something changed in the hearts of the Tirivalians. For the first time in months, they did not feel abandoned. They did not feel forgotten. They felt hope. A child pressed her face against the cracks in the stone, watching as the human ships moved like predators through the flames. Her mother pulled her close, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Who are they, Mama?" the child whispered. The mother's voice shook as she answered. "They are Deathworlders. They are humans." And as the sky burned with war, the people of Terevel held on to the only truth that mattered. The Deathworlders had come. The Dominion would no longer have the skies to themselves, and the storm was only beginning. The battle in the skies raged on. Human ships clashed with the Dominion fleet, tearing holes through their proud armada. But the Dominion was not only a force of the stars. They had armies waiting on the ground, soldiers already walking the broken cities of Tereval. When the humans arrived, the Dominion laughed again. "So the savages think they can win with a handful of ships," one commander sneered. "Let them come. We will crush them in the dirt." They did not expect the humans to descend, but the humans came. The first dropships cut through the smoke-filled clouds like burning arrows. They fell fast, engines screaming, fire trailing behind them. The Tirivalians hiding in the ruins looked to the sky in terror. To them, the sound was thunder. The fire was doom. Then the dropships opened, and the humans stepped out. They were smaller than the towering Dominion soldiers, their bodies wrapped in armor the color of iron and shadow. Their helmets hid their faces, glowing with sharp lights. Each carried a weapon that hummed with power, larger than anything the Tirivalians had ever seen. They did not march like conquerors. They moved like hunters, fast, silent, deadly. The Dominion roared and charged. Their weapons spat fire. Streets cracked beneath their armored feet as they stormed forward. The humans did not retreat. They opened fire and the world shook. The weapons of Earth spoke with thunder. Explosions ripped through the Dominion ranks, tearing machines apart, shattering walls and turning the streets into storms of dust. Human soldiers moved in packs, covering one another, advancing step by step. Every strike was precise. Every shot was brutal. Where the Tirivalians had only run, the humans stood. Where the Dominion had only conquered, the humans resisted. And for the first time since the invasion, the Dominion soldiers faltered. From the cracks of ruined buildings, the Tirivalians watched in disbelief. These were the feared monsters of rumor? These were the Deathworlders? Yes. But they were not the mindless beasts the galaxy had whispered of. They were something more frightening and more hopeful. One human soldier, wounded by fire, stumbled. A Dominion warrior loomed over him with a blade raised high. But before the strike could fall, another human threw himself forward, taking the blow on his armor, forcing the Dominion back, and dragging his comrade to safety. The Tirivalians saw this and their hearts stirred. Even in the fire of battle, the humans protected one another. Even in death, they refused to abandon their own. The Dominion grew desperate. They unleashed their war machines, tanks of iron and claws, beasts bred for war. They rolled into the streets, tearing through rubble, weapons blazing. The humans adapted. One squad rushed forward, planting strange devices on the sides of the machines. They detonated, fire blooming like suns, tearing the monsters apart. Another squad climbed rooftops, raining fire from above. The humans moved with a fury born not of arrogance but of survival. Every moment, every breath was a struggle they seemed to embrace, and in their struggle, the Tirivalians saw strength. In the heart of the capital's ruins, a group of Tirivalian survivors huddled in a shattered hall. Dominion soldiers had surrounded them, weapons raised, ready to finish their work. Mothers clutched children. Elders closed their eyes, waiting for the end. But before the blades could fall, the air cracked with sound. Human soldiers stormed through the broken walls, their weapons roaring. The Dominion fell in showers of fire and dust. When the smoke cleared, the survivors opened their eyes to see armored figures standing over them. One of the humans knelt, lowering his weapon. His helmet shifted, revealing eyes filled not with cruelty but with resolve. His voice, though rough and foreign, was steady. "You are safe now." The Tirivalians wept. Some reached out, trembling hands touching the armor of their saviors. For the first time in weeks, they felt something stronger than fear. They felt protection. The battle spread across the planet. In city after city, humans dropped from the skies, fighting not as conquerors but as guardians. They held the line where no one else had dared. They pushed the Dominion back step by bloody step. The Dominion still had numbers, still had power, but the humans had something different: endurance. They fought through wounds, through exhaustion, through fire and smoke. Where others would fall, they rose again, and the Tiravalians began to believe. In the deep cavern where Elder Serene waited, messengers rushed in, their faces lit with hope. "They are here," one cried. "The humans fight the Dominion in the streets." The old elder closed his eyes, tears slipping down his face. He whispered a prayer to the stars, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. The Deathworlders had come, the first strike had begun, and the Dominion was learning fear. The war on Terevel's surface grew heavier with each passing day. Smoke covered the skies, turning daylight into a shadowed twilight. The Dominion had thought themselves unstoppable, but the humans refused to bow. Every street became a battlefield. Every ruin became a shield. Human soldiers pushed forward through fire and death, holding ground inch by inch. The Dominion unleashed their fury. They sent wave after wave of soldiers, machines, and weapons built to terrify. Entire districts burned under their assault. But still the humans stood. They did not fight with elegance. They fought with grit. They fought with rage, and they fought with a strange kind of love, for each other and for the people they had sworn to protect. In the shattered capital, a group of Tiravalians huddled in what had once been a library. Now it was only broken stone and ash. Dominion forces surrounded them, ready to strike. The Tiravalians held one another, their hearts heavy with fear. And then the thunder came. Human soldiers charged into the ruins, weapons blazing. The ground shook as Dominion bodies fell. Explosions lit the air, smoke billowed, and the screams of war echoed through the ruins. When the battle ended, the humans stood, bloodied and weary, but alive. One of them turned to the survivors. His armor was scarred, his face pale with exhaustion. Yet his voice was steady when he spoke. "Get up. You're safe now. Stay behind us." The Tiravalians could hardly believe it. These warriors from the death world were not only fighting, they were shielding them with their own lives. Hope spread like fire. Stories passed from mouth to mouth, carried through whispers and tears. A child pulled from rubble by a human medic. A mother reunited with her son because a soldier had stood against 3 Dominion warriors alone. An elder carried on a human's back through miles of fire and ruin. Each story became a seed of courage. For the first time since the invasion, the Tiravalians began to lift their heads. They were still weak, still broken, but when they saw the humans fight, they began to believe survival was possible. The Dominion noticed. Their arrogance began to falter. The humans were not what they expected. They were supposed to be primitive, savage beasts unworthy of fear. Instead, they were relentless. Dominion commanders barked new orders. Stronger weapons, deadlier machines. If the humans wanted to fight like monsters, then the Dominion would drown them in fire. Huge walkers, machines with legs like towers, marched into the cities. Their cannons blasted holes through walls, their claws ripped through stone. The ground trembled beneath their steps. The Tiravalians cried out in despair. Nothing had ever stopped such machines before. But the humans did not run. A squad of soldiers darted through the streets carrying strange devices. They moved like shadows weaving through fire. They climbed the giant walker, clinging to its metal legs, its roaring engines shaking the air. One soldier planted the device, then shouted to his comrades to jump. The blast that followed shook the city. The walker collapsed in flames, its massive frame crashing into the ruins. The humans rose from the smoke, coughing, bloodied but alive, and they kept fighting. In another corner of the city, a wounded Tiravalian child cried in the rubble, her leg trapped beneath stone. A Dominion soldier closed in, weapon raised to end her. She sobbed, too weak to move. Then a human appeared. His armor cracked, his weapon nearly broken, yet he charged without hesitation. He tackled the Dominion warrior, wrestled him to the ground, and drove his blade through the enemy's chest. When it was over, he lifted the stone with shaking arms, pulling the child free. Blood dripped from his wounds, but he smiled through the pain. "You're safe," he whispered. The child's tears fell onto his armor as she clung to him. In the hidden cavern, Elder Serene listened to the reports. His old heart trembled, but not with fear. With wonder. "The Deathworlders bleed for us," he whispered. "They fight as if our lives are worth more than their own." The people around him wept, not with sorrow but with gratitude. For the humans, the battle was not easy. Every soldier bore wounds. Many fell and did not rise again. But even in death they left behind courage. Their brothers and sisters picked up their weapons and pressed on. The Dominion had the numbers. The Dominion had the machines. But the humans had something far more dangerous. They had the will to fight until the very end. And the Trevelyan's, fragile and gentle though they were, began to find courage in that will. No longer did they hide in silence. They brought food to the soldiers. They tended to the wounded. They carried water, built barricades, and whispered songs of hope. For the first time, they were no longer only victims. They were survivors. The ground war stretched on, the planet trembling with every battle. But through it all, one truth became clear. The humans were not savages. They were not mindless beasts. They were protectors. They were guardians. They were Deathworlders, and they were teaching the galaxy what it meant to endure. The days of endless fire began to shift. The Dominion, once so confident, started to falter. Their mighty fleets were torn apart by human warships above, and their soldiers were dragged into brutal fights on the ground they had once thought conquered. And everywhere the Dominion turned, they saw the same faces, the Deathworlders of Earth. They bled. They suffered. They lost comrades every day, yet they did not break. The Dominion learned fear. One night in the ruined city, when the smoke had settled and the stars shone faintly through broken clouds, Elder Serene walked among the human soldiers. He had never dared to step so close to warriors before. His kind were gentle, fragile, their lives spent in study and peace. But here he was, standing beside giants of war. A young soldier sat on a broken wall, his hands stained with blood as he cleaned his weapon. Serene could see exhaustion in his eyes, but also something else. Determination like fire that refused to die. "Why do you fight so hard for us?" Serene asked quietly. "We are weak. We have nothing to give you." The soldier looked up. His voice was rough but steady. "Because you asked. Because no one else came." Serene's heart trembled. Such simple words, yet they carried the weight of galaxies. The Trevelyan's began to change. At first they had hidden behind walls, afraid even to step near the battle. Now they gathered supplies for the humans. They carried water through fire-scorched streets. They tended to the wounded with shaking but willing hands. One young Trevelyan boy, no more than 12 cycles old, followed the humans into the ruins. He carried no weapon, only a pack of medical supplies. When a soldier was struck by shrapnel, the boy pressed cloth to the wound, whispering prayers through his tears. The soldier gritted his teeth against the pain, but he smiled at the boy. "You're braver than you think," he said. For the boy, those words were like a crown. He would never forget them. The Dominion saw these changes too, and they grew desperate. They unleashed new horrors, creatures bred for war, machines of terror that towered over the battlefield. They thought fear would break the humans, and through them, crush the fragile spirits of the Trevelyan's. But the opposite happened. When the creatures came, humans met them head-on. Rockets and bullets tore through their hides. Soldiers leapt onto their backs, dragging them down with knives and explosives. When the machines came, humans swarmed them, crawling up their iron limbs like furious ants. They cut through wires, planted bombs, and pulled them into the dirt. The Dominion commanders could hardly believe it. Each weapon they sent to terrify only became another legend of human defiance. In one battle, a group of Trevelyan's became trapped in a burning hall. Flames closed in, the air thick with smoke. The Dominion laughed from afar, sure the weak ones would perish. But then the humans came. Soldiers smashed through walls, dragging the Trevelyan's out, coughing and choking, but alive. One human fell while shielding a child with his own body, his armor blackened by fire. The survivors wept over him, their trembling hands brushing his burned armor. To them, he was not a stranger from a distant star. He was family. Elder Serene called the people together in the hidden caverns. His voice, once soft and tired, now rang strong. "We are no longer only victims," he told them. "The Deathworlders fight for us, but they cannot stand alone. We must rise, not with weapons, but with courage. We will feed them. We will heal them. We will shield their children as they shield ours." The cavern echoed with voices of agreement. For the first time, the Trevelyan's were not only waiting for rescue, they were part of it. In the skies above, the Dominion's fleets were thinning. Human ships, scarred but relentless, held their ground. Pilots who had not slept in days still flew into battle, shouting across comms with laughter and rage. On the ground, soldiers dug in, pushing the enemy back street by street. Dominion commanders raged, unable to understand why the humans refused to surrender, why they refused to fear. And in their confusion, cracks began to show. Orders faltered. Troops hesitated. Some even fled. The humans pressed harder. For the Trevelyan's, it was like watching dawn after endless night. They had thought themselves too weak to resist. They had thought no one in the galaxy would ever come. Yet here were warriors from a death world, dying in their streets, protecting them without question. And here they were, rising from the shadows to stand behind them. It was no longer just Earth's fight. It was theirs too. As the Dominion retreated from another failed assault, one commander growled to his second-in-command. These are not ordinary beings. They do not fight like soldiers. They fight like storms. The second-in-command, eyes wide with fear, whispered the word that now carried across the galaxy. Deathworlders. The tide of war was turning. The Dominion still held power, still brought death. But they were no longer facing only a broken people. They were facing humans. And the humans had given the Trevelyan something they had not known in generations: hope. The final battle came like a storm. For weeks the Dominion had tried to hold their grip on Terevel, but their forces were stretched thin. Human warships patrolled the skies, scarred yet unyielding. On the ground, soldiers dug in, pushing the invaders back inch by inch. And now, with their empire humiliated, the Dominion sent everything they had. The largest fleet yet darkened the skies, their ships blotting out the stars. From orbit, fire rained down. On the surface, legions of soldiers and machines marched in endless waves. The Trevelyan's trembled. The air quaked with war. It seemed as though the planet itself might break. But the humans did not flinch. On the front lines, Captain Arlen stood with his squad. Their armor dented, their weapons worn, their bodies pushed to the edge. Yet his eyes were steady. "This is where we make our stand," he said. His voice carried not only to his soldiers but to the Trevelyan volunteers who now stood beside them, holding supplies, tending to the wounded, refusing to hide. "We don't back down. Not now, not ever," the soldiers roared in reply. Even the Trevelyans, once too timid to raise their voices, cried out with them. For a moment, fear vanished, replaced by something greater. The battle was chaos. Dominion soldiers poured into the streets, their war cries echoing. Walkers thundered across the ruins, cannons blazing. Fire rained from the skies, shaking the ground. But humanity fought with everything they had. Rockets screamed into the air, slamming into enemy ships. Tanks rumbled through broken avenues. Infantry surged forward, firing into the waves of Dominion troops, and the Trevelyans were there too. Not with weapons of war, but with courage. They carried ammunition. They dragged the wounded to safety. They sang in their trembling voices, songs of their people, songs of hope that rose above the screams of war. Even in the blood and fire, something beautiful was being born. High above the planet, the human fleet faced the Dominion's armada. The enemy ships were larger, more advanced, but the humans fought like predators unleashed. Pilots shouted across the comms, their laughter wild, their voices steady. "Hold the line. Don't let them through." For Earth. For Tereval. Explosions lit the sky. Metal tore. Entire warships broke apart in fire. Yet still the humans pressed forward, refusing to give an inch. For every ship they lost, they took 2 of the enemy. For every soldier who fell, 10 more rose with their fury. On the surface, Captain Arlen's squad fought through the ruins of the capital. At his side ran Elder Serene, too old to wield a weapon but carrying a banner he had fashioned from torn cloth. It bore no symbol of the Dominion. It bore no crest of a king. It bore only the mark of Earth, the symbol of the humans who had come when no one else did. "Forward," Serene cried, his voice breaking yet proud. "Stand with them." And the Trevelyans answered. They surged behind the humans, no longer shadows, no longer victims. At the height of the battle, the Dominion unleashed their last weapon, a massive war machine, taller than towers, bristling with cannons and claws. It strode into the city like a god of destruction, leveling buildings with each step. The Trevelyans gasped in terror. Hope trembled, but then the humans moved. Arlen's squad charged the machine, climbing its massive legs under heavy fire. One soldier fell. Another was thrown down, but still they climbed. Explosives strapped to their backs, fury in their eyes. The great machine roared, its cannons blasting holes into the ruins. But then fire bloomed across its chest. One explosion, then another, until the beast of steel collapsed in flames. The city shook with the sound of its fall. The humans emerged from the smoke, scarred, bloodied, but alive. The Terravalians wept openly. Above the planet, the Dominion fleet broke. Ship after ship fell, burning into the atmosphere. The survivors fled into the darkness, leaving behind wreckage and silence. For the first time since the invasion began, the skies of Turaval were clear. When the last shots faded, when the last enemy soldier fell silent, the humans stood among the ruins. Their numbers were fewer. Their faces were lined with exhaustion and grief, but they had won. Elder Serene stepped forward, his fragile hands shaking as he touched Captain Arlen's scarred armor. "You came when no one else did," the old Teravalian whispered. "You bled for us. You gave us back our lives. We will never forget." Arlen looked at him, his face weary but calm. "That's what we do," he said simply. "We're human." The Teravalians rebuilt in the days that followed. The ruins remained. The scars of war would never vanish, but they were no longer helpless. They had seen what courage looked like. They had learned to stand. And everywhere, in songs and carvings, in whispered stories passed from parent to child, one truth remained. When the galaxy had abandoned them, when death itself had seemed certain, the Deathworlders of Earth had appeared and nothing would ever be the same again.